if I'm not speaking loud enough, let me know. And I don't mean to bore you, but I have 3 things I wanted to read to you, and then I'm going to open it up, and I have a list of topics that we'll all get in on. Yeah, the 3 of us will get in on. I thought the earliest thing I could find was something that Marion Figley, if any of you remember her, wrote about our mother. And it was an article in the October 5th, 1990 issue of the Beachcomber. So I thought I'd read you excerpts from that because it tells you what it was like before I was born, and I'm the oldest, and before they were born. So I give you a little idea of what the island was like then. And Marion writes, and what she remembers, referring to my mother, most of all, was being disappointed by her first initial sight of Beach Haven, a place which she first saw as a college girl in 1927, a place to which she figured she would never return after she finished her summer job at the Ingleside Hotel. I thought, what is this place? It looked like the end of the world to me. Well, Muriel Howard arrived in Beach Haven in the summer of 27, a self-described, serious-minded girl from Newton, Massachusetts, whose father had thoroughly checked out on the propriety of the Ingleside Hotel before allowing his daughter to serve as a waitress there for the summer. Entering her senior year at Boston University, she was determined not to get involved with anyone, particularly the handsome blonde-haired, blue-eyed man who met the train just to look over the 23 new waitresses. But Edmund Oliver, who also worked at the hotel, knew what he wanted. Throughout the summer, the two dated each other exclusively.
Mother told me, I just had to interject here, Mother told me the reason he picked her out was that on her suitcase it had a Paris sticker. And she thinks he thought she was rich.
But her sister had been to Europe the previous year and had a lot of European stickers on her suitcase that Mother was using. Mother returned to Boston and graduated from BU, then came back to Edmond and the Ingleside. In the fall of 28, they married and settled in Philadelphia, but only for a couple of weeks. She said, I was used to living near Boston and going into the city anytime. I never dreamed I'd end up living in Beach Haven, but my husband was determined to live here. I had no interest in the town at all. I thought I would never get used to it. Well, as you know, that next year the stock market crashed. And she tells about, she said, yes, it was bad, scrimping along, but everybody was in the same boat. I think we were on welfare, which a lot of people were. We had plenty of company. You had $6 a week to feed a family of 4, and you could do it. And then they finally found a place. They lived in 6 different houses in Beach Haven, apartments or houses in Beach Haven, plus they spent 2 winters working at the Breakers Hotel in Palm Beach, Florida. And we spent a winter when I was a baby in Philadelphia, and they spent another period of time in Boston, but they always came, in Beach Haven they rented 6 different apartments, and then they had to get out of the place where they were. And they found a place on 2nd Street that rented for $20 a month. And they lived there, they rented there for 2 years, and then they either had to buy it or get out, and they bought it. And Mother loved it. And she lived there for the next 59 years.
I think they paid, let me interject.
$22,000.
I think they paid $2,000 for the home that we grew up in. And she borrowed the money from her father, who was quite a successful farmer in Massachusetts. In fact, he was the one that invented a certain watercress.
Well, he was the watercress king of Boston.
Yeah, he was well known as the watercress king. So she borrowed the money from him, and I have his ledger today, which is just fascinating, with all the farm products and how much they sold for and so forth. It was an interesting heritage, but go on.
Well, the interest, they borrowed $2,000 from him, and interest, it's interesting to know, was 5%. Even back
Was
then.
it?
Wow. Which sounds high for that.
Marion thought it was gonna be about 2 or 3%. And we looked at the book. Well, that's how we
It
ended up.
hasn't changed much. The interest rate.
I was born in the first house that they rented in Beach Haven. Well, it was a little shed, really. It was 2 rooms and a bathroom. And Chloe was born in the third house that they rented in Beach Haven, which is where Julius Robinson first had his law office. We rented it from his mother-in-law. Since it was torn down a couple of years ago. So that's where we got our, and Marion was born on one of our trips to Boston, and she was born in Newton, Massachusetts. I wrote this essay, I'm changing the subject a little bit. I wrote this essay a number of years ago, and I tried to get Poochie Thomas to print it in the Beachcomber, but she wasn't interested. But Marion has always said I should try to get it published again. And I called it The Island's Natural Bounty. Back when there were icemen, milkmen, eggmen, breadmen coming door to door, we were growing up on the island. We weren't subsistent farmers, but the natural bounty of the place, a mother who liked to garden and friends who fished and hunted, provided us with a certain amount of sustenance. We children picked dandelion greens from the Angleside Hotel lawns in the spring, blackberries from a large patch by the bay at the end of Pearl Street in summer, and cranberries between 18th and 19th Streets in North Beach Haven in the fall. We also picked whiting, frost fish, off the beach on those special nights in the autumn when they came ashore, dug for soft clams in the mud flats at the end of Taylor Avenue, fished in the bay with drop lines for flounder, fluke, weakfish, croakers, sea bass, and eels, and trapped crabs and minnows. Crabs and clams were plentiful. Mother can remember having as much as half a pillowcase full of crab meat in the icebox. That was the day I was born. They'd been out crabbing with some friends over the weekend and then picking them the rest of the time. She said, half a pillowcase full of crab meat, which is hard for me to imagine because I know how hard it is to. In winter, we saved our orange and grapefruit peels. Mother candied them. We packaged them and sold them door to door to earn money for Christmas presents. With Hires root beer extract, we made all the soda we could consume, some of which exploded periodically throughout the summer. When the mackerel started to run, Daddy would go out with Captain Newbroom and come back with a load for Mother to salt. These were kept in a big crock in the old shed. Nothing pleased Daddy more than a Sunday morning breakfast of fried salt mackerel and boiled potatoes. Fishermen friends would leave blues, bonitas, Spanish mackerel, and tuna in the kitchen sink. When they switched to hunting in the fall, there would be duck for us to eat. Mother tended a beautiful vegetable garden, a few peach trees and a grape arbor in our backyard. Summer brought all the fresh vegetables we could eat. Throughout the year, we enjoyed her preserves of grape, blackberry, peach, and beach plum, tomatoes, tuna, and salt mackerel. With progress, an electric refrigerator, our gardening dwindled to grapes and flowers. The blackberries and cranberries have given way to roads, houses, and gravel. The bay has given way to pleasure boats and pollution. The crock for the mackerel and the bottle capper for the root beer have disappeared, and although there are still plenty of dandelions around, we never really relished them. Ah, progress, but what pleasant memories. I'll read one more and then let some other people talk. I had compiled this book a few years ago of family anecdotes. And I keep going to do a sequel, but nobody's making me do it, so it doesn't get done very fast. 89. Well, when we were kids, and I guess when you were kids too, those of you who were kids once. If you remember the Sunday afternoon drive, whether you go to church, then you have Sunday dinner, and then you go for a ride. Well, this is our Sunday afternoon drive. Daddy always had an old car, except for a few years during World War II when we didn't have any transportation. My favorite was a huge Peerless. It was so big we could put a child's table and 2 chairs in the back between the front and back seats. This we would do and play in there on rainy days. I also remember an Essex, the Super 6. It looked anything but super. This is the one that died during the war. It became the home for our cats in the side yard before it was carted away.
Only for the cats.
I heard about a car he had at the time he met my mother. He had rigged it so the back of the front seats could be lowered to meet the back seat. We never could get Mother to tell us much about this. I've often thought, wouldn't Daddy have loved a van? On Sunday afternoon, the whole family would get in the car and go for an afternoon drive. Daddy would stop at the gas station. The conversation would go something like this. Daddy, give me $1 worth. Give. See you have the family out for a drive. Lovely day. Daddy, yeah, Gif, we're down for the day. Wanted the family to get to the beach. We've got our lunch in a shoebox. Should be a good outing for them. Gif, well, have a nice day. Of course, Gif and our family lived on the island year-round. They were, in a sense, poking fun at the day trippers, which goes on to this day. We would usually head north, passing the old Pihela Gunning Club, perched in the sand up by the ocean. Daddy would point this out as the place where he and his father were guests many years before on his first trip to the island. I've never been able to figure out what year that would have been, but I think it must have been like 1910 or 15 or something like that. We would, that's what I read. Often our destination would be to Herbert's at the turn of the road. The turn of the road meant where you could take a left turn and go over the 5 bridges to the mainland. If you didn't turn left, you could continue north for another 7 or 8 miles until you reached Barnegat Lighthouse. We seldom went further north unless we were visiting a childhood friend of my father's who had a summer place in Harvey Cedars. Usually we would get to the turn of the road, and there on the right would be the old trolley car from Philadelphia embedded in the sand. This was Herbert's. It was loaded with merchandise. You could barely move down the center aisle single file. Most of the family underwear came from Herbert's. Daddy would stick his finger through a hole in an undergarment, hold it up in the air so Herbert could see it and say, because Herbert would be up by the door with the cash register, Herbert, how much for this? The bargaining would proceed, and we would come home with something new to wear. I think of Herbert's as one of the first outlet stores. Well, that's the end of the reading.
Well, let me tell you about,
Herbert's?
not Herbert's, the friend that they used to go visit in Harvey
Harvey
Cedars.
Cedars, Stampede.
I never knew what a fire hose looked like. For some reason, I just didn't know. But his friend had gotten all these hoses from fire engines in the city of Burlington, and he had them lined up like, instead of a boardwalk, he had an actual boardwalk of fire hoses that led up to his house, which was way out by, more closer to the ocean. But it was years later I thought, wait a minute, those were fire hoses that we walked on as kids from Burlington. But it was fun.
And then you lived next to him later.
Yes, I lived next to his son years later in Burlington, here on the river. That's interesting.
Well, then we thought we'd talk about the following topics. Well, one thing when we're talking about the housing, the number of places we lived in, the house that Mother lived in for 59 years had no central heat. It had a stove in the kitchen, a stove in the living room. We had an ice box. And when it was cold in the winter, she would heat plates up in the old stove in the kitchen, and we'd take them upstairs to get the beds warm, put them between the sheets. So when we went to bed, we wouldn't freeze to death when we got there.
And it was known that someone had died in the back bedroom.
By the man who built the house.
Dan Kramer. Dan Kramer, who was supposed to be
One
lame,
arm.
one arm, you know, which you can imagine as kids, we just couldn't forget that one. by telling our children, our friends. Dan Kramer in the back bedroom, one arm, died.
That's three now. Well, one of the topics we thought we'd talk about was isolation, growing up on the island in those days. You wanna take that? Oh, shopping by mail.
Well,
Yeah.
of course, back then, there was a bus that went to Philadelphia every day. So that's, in the fall, we'd get on the bus early one morning and up and get our school clothes in Philadelphia and come back. And public transportation way back then. It was great. And then also during the war, our dentist was called off into the service, so we had to go to Philadelphia to a dentist. We went by bus and over some of the other.
Once Mother did take us by train to Boston, and we got the train in Manahawkin. Back then you could get the train to Manahawkin to go, and then you had to change in Jersey City, I think, get across the Hudson and get another train up to Boston. And we didn't get to the city very. Once when we were older, Chloe and I a couple times would take Captain Starnes' boat down to Atlantic City at the end of our summer work and to buy clothes and flats, you said, for the school year.
We did everything by catalog.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh, we'd pour
The
over
Sears-
Montgomery Ward's and Sears catalog, and
could hardly wait for it to come.
then somebody in town would have the same hat and shirt. She had it way down on her eyebrows, and I had mine back on there. Early on, I knew women. I was a woman, didn't like to have the same outfit as somebody else.
Anything else?
But we
about
did,
that?
we poured over the catalogs. Mother made a lot of our clothes. A
We
lot.
had hand-me-downs from friends and Mother made a lot.
And there was Peterson's 5 and 10, and Mother always said, you should patronize our locals, because she said, what would we do without them? And I've always remembered that, to show you're grateful that they're there. But Peterson's have wonderful, and so do Gerber's, have wonderful fabrics. So
Peterson's
we
was
also-
as crowded as Herbert's.
Yeah.
Peterson's was so crowded, I mean, it was like this.
Merchandise.
Daddy, of course, always thought we didn't need anything. And he used to tell us we'd get Peteritis if we got something. You bought a ring there, and your finger turned green, you had Peteritis. And something else, you had Peteritis.
Tell them about the perfumes.
Oh, that's
Oh,
another
the
story.
perfumes.
But growing up in Beach Haven it was a nice little town. And one place I never wanted to live was Barnegat Life. Nothing to do up here.
Especially the house you're in.
Well, anyway, it was such a nice old town because there were two drugstores, 2 pharmacies,
Oh,
how many
in Beach Haven.
churches, like 4
Three
churches,
Mhm.
and a movie,
Yeah.
The
a lumber
movies.
company, a doctor, a dentist. I mean, everything was right there, and usually within walking distance of where we lived. 2 grocery stores. There was an Acme and an A&P. And let's see what else. It had everything.
Well, we had the flyer company too.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, social, part of the social life. The other topic I put down was the beach. Mother said, if you live at the beach, you'll always have company. And I remember at one time we had 9 kids in the attic. Daddy had rigged up a rope for safety. If we had to get out in case of a fire or something, we were supposed to get down this rope. Fortunately, we never had to use it. Another time I remember somebody sleeping out, well, was it my uncle, I guess, sleeping out front in his car. And one time we even had somebody sleeping underneath the dining room table. And you can talk about other things about the beach.
Aunt Mariel,
What?
what I always thought was interesting is what you did in those days for entertainment.
Yeah, well, that's what I said, we're gonna talk about spring and fall, summer and winter at the beach.
Okay.
Because we really use the beach all seasons of the year.
One thing we had that nobody else had was a boardwalk, and that's where everybody went in the summertime for a walk on the boardwalk in Beach Haven.
Yeah, after supper, our father always said, it's time to take a stroll. You know, that old word stroll down the boardwalk, and we go down and see the whole town down there.
Walk out on the fishing pier,
Oh,
that
yeah,
way out
fishing
into
pier.
the ocean, and then they had shops all along the boardwalk. It was where everybody went. Of course, now they go to, what's the name? Fundraiser.
And that
Ministry
the Angleside Hotel was, you know, alive and well and everything, and they had dances there on Saturday nights, and we used to go over to the dances. And I remember some man, I had some pretty apricot, I don't know where that came from, a pretty apricot taffeta dress with a blue velvet ribbon. And I was going down the hall there to the dance floor, and some man, I must have been about 9 or 10 years old, and he said, "You must be the belle of the ball." Well, I had no idea what that meant. It's too bad I didn't, I found out later, but we decided what, because I had a little orchestra, and we'd go over there and dance on Saturday nights. And they would let us, which I thought was very nice.
And it was a dry hotel.
It was dry, yeah,
That's right.
and it was a Quaker establishment. And then in the fall and the spring, I remember my girlfriend and I had a wonderful porch. If it was a rainy day or not very nice out, we'd ride our bikes on that porch hours at a time singing Daisy, Daisy. Place was built for two.
Go do the seasons, the season.
Well, that was summer, we just did summer.
Okay.
Well, the Y, swimming at the Y.
Yes. The Y, we used to go over and have a picnic at the Y. The Y was where the train would come into Beach Haven, and to turn around and come back north, they had to go to the Y and then back.
Back the other way.
That's where it turned around. But the tracks were there for many years, and big rocks. We'd go out there and have a picnic, lunch or something.
And John mentioned earlier about Roosevelt's funeral. And the earliest I ever went swimming in Beach Haven was the day of his funeral. It was early in April. I went down and the bay was so warm, I couldn't believe it. It was the earliest we'd ever been swimming there, that I'd ever been. We had a cousin that would go in the ocean up to Thanksgiving Day, but that's another story. We thought it was nuts.
Take the bar.
Another thing we did every Christmas at the movie, Mr. Palmer had free movies for everybody. The whole island went to those free
Oh.
movies. Did you get in on that, Jerry?
Oh, yes.
I mean, everybody
It was
was
a bunch
there.
of Three Stooges
And he
stuff.
gave each kid a little box of candy and an orange. And that was every Christmas, that was when we did. It was very generous.
Yeah, that was winter. So also in winter, if we had snow or ice storm, we'd go sledding on the dunes. Because we did have a few dunes down there once upon a time. And at the end of the street, there was a good dune. I remember sledding on that quite often. And boy, when you hit the sand where the ocean had come up to the snow or the ice, you came to an abrupt stop.
You kept going.
And we were allowed to have beach fires then, because when we have a gang of company, we drag the corn and the hot dogs and whatever, and just build a fire right there at the end of the street, which was, you know, and then later on when I was in high school, they moved it down to Holgate, but I remember beach parties with fires blazing and people swimming at night, and it was all quite adventuresome.
No permits.
No permits.
Oh, and under the beach, I also put bathing suits. We went from those wool bathing suits loaded with sand. I remember I had a yellow one, you know, a yellow one piece, and you'd come back from the beach and you know the crotch would be hanging down. And you know, all the sand was in it, every curl of it, you know. It's just we sort of went from wool bathing suits when we were kids up to bikinis, you know. We went the gamut of the bathing suits.
But Aunt Muriel, tell them about the rubber one that was.
Oh, gosh, should I read that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's.
See if I'll see if I can find it. Oh, that's funny, that's Daddy's so funny.
What year was that?
Their father was very humorous.
Here's Daddy's stuff.
That's the card.
One time they made rubber bathing suits.
Oh, well, let me read it.
And you know what happened to a rubber bathing cap over the winter? They usually disintegrated.
I'll see if I can find it.
It's just like rubber bands do now.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Why don't you talk and I'll find it?
Well, anyhow, one of the big events on the boardwalk back then was a baby parade. And everybody would bring their babies and have a contest. It's fun.
How about the mosquitoes?
Well, you can go on to the
Oh, the
topic of
mosquitoes were
summer.
terrible. Terrible.
Awful.
That doesn't prove.
I used to put on overalls, daddy's overalls, and to hang up the wash. But they were just so terrible. But another topic was summer jobs.
Oh, yes.
I don't know, let's see if I can find
I
that.
think we've been through every one. The old waitress jobs, of course, from various places. And Chloe was a lifeguard for a few years. And,
Babysitting,
oh, yeah.
We all babysat.
and then waitressing at that nursing home type place where they gave very small servings, Collison's.
Oh,
We used to laugh about it, but now we're the age where we like small servings. Those days we said, look at this platter. Well, there's hardly anything on it.
yeah, that was one of my first jobs. It was a bed and breakfast stand.
Yeah.
But she served dinner too. And that's when I
Very little.
I think I was 13 years old, and it was my first job. And one day I thought, I don't feel like going to work today. And my mother saw me later, and she said, "Why aren't you at work?" I didn't feel like going today.
You get yourself.
I learned to be responsible right then and there.
I found the section about the, you just never knew what daddy would come out with. Back in the 30s, for a brief period, there was such a thing as real rubber bathing suits for women. They split easily, especially if they were the previous summer's stock. We were all down on the beach and Aunt Evelyn went in for a swim in her new rubber suit. Daddy said, "Look at Evelyn struggling out there. She's trying to drown some puppies." She was wrestling with her suit, which had come apart. As she came out of the surf, trying to cover herself as best she could with hands, arms, and scraps of rubber, Daddy called out, "Save me the ones with the pink noses."
Well, back to summer jobs, let me tell you this. Being in Beach Haven, we had a school bus, and everybody worked so darn hard. Some of us had 2 or 3 jobs to make all that money to last us all winter long with our spending habits. So probably we didn't see each other all summer. Well, the first day of school back on the bus, it was like this grand reunion took place. Like, what'd you do this summer? How much money did you make? Where'd you go? Well, hardly anybody went anyplace. They were just there working, but it was so refreshing to be so thrown into an entirely different lifestyle in the summer, which was hard work. I was a lifeguard, babysat, waitress, everything else. Yura was an usher in the movies, and Marion did the 5 and 10. I mean, we just did it all.
Me.
Acme. And that when you came, it was just like old home week when we got back on that school bus the first week. It was just so much fun. I've never experienced anything like it.
That working in the Acme was fun. I was in charge of the dairy department.
So she was called the
And
dairy.
and these great big, it was back when you had to cut this big cheddar cheese, big block like that, and I'd have to cut that off and weigh it and mark it and put it in. And this was in the back room. And also in the back room, the produce young fellows were bagging grapes and cherries. I mean, to tell you, I don't know how the Acme made any profit this summer. The boys would throw cherries and grapes through the fan. That was and one time I had it in my cooler where I kept all the whipped cream containers, you know, and Ready Whip. They had a fight in there, and I had to clean up that mess, you know. Over the place. It was just terrible. But as I said, those poor managers, they had to put up with all this young help in the summertime.
I wrote a section, if you can stand to hear me read again, about my summer jobs. My first summer job, believe it or not, was as a model. Of course, I was only about 7 or 8. My friend Eveline's mother worked as a housekeeper for 2 older ladies one summer. They seemed old at the time because I was about 7 or 8. They were probably in their 40s, but I thought they were ancient. Eveline and I would pose for them in their living room while they would sketch away. At the end of about an hour, they would give us each a quarter. We did this a number of times that summer. I found out later they did the illustrations for the Dick and Jane books. We used that series in the elementary school I attended. We were posing for a health book they were illustrating, and I've never seen it. I'd love to, if anybody ever comes across a Dick and Jane health book, I'd love to see it sometime. The next job was working off fines for the library books I kept out too long. The library. That was awful. I always owed money at the library. The librarian was kind. I didn't have any money to pay the fines, but I did know alphabetical order, so she would have me return the books to the shelves to pay off my fines. After that, it was work at Charlie Kramer's grocery on Beach Avenue between 2nd and 3rd Streets. Then I went to taking care of plants in a greenhouse because I got into my head I wanted to be a farmer. And then I was a dessert girl at a restaurant, an usher at the movies, and there was always babysitting. Then I was 14 and able to get my working papers and move on to better paying jobs. I graduated to a bigger store from Charlie Kramer's when I was able to get the working papers. It wasn't a supermarket then, it's where Murphy's is now, and it used to be an Acme. But it was before, this was during the war. We still had to run back and forth behind the counter, gathering the items the shopper wanted, then adding up the total on a paper bag. I became very fast and accurate in addition. Plus, we had to do the stamps, the rationing, the coupons. We had to do that too. But I have a cute little story that happened at Charlie Kramer's. Do you remember those little pies you could buy for about 10 cents? Charlie sold them in his grocery. As the grocery was a gathering place for the locals, except that it lacked a pot-bellied stove, men would come in to chew the fat. One of them brought a pie and proceeded to eat it there. The other men watched but didn't say a word. When he was finished, Charlie asked, "How was it?" "Pretty good, but the crust was tough," said the man answered. "Well, that figures. You ate the cardboard too." Well, I graduated on that work. Then I worked at the Acme for about 7 years, and then I graduated from the Acme to the Acme Hotel, which is now the Catch. It was a hotel and a bar and restaurant. And I think I worked there 2 years after I was old enough to work in a place that served liquor. Mother was so afraid I'd become a bar fly or something. But any more about
Chloe,
summer
what was it
jobs?
like lifeguarding? I don't remember.
Oh, I made tons of money teaching private swimming lessons. Because there was a wealthy element there in Beach Haven. It was a Beach Haven Little A Harbor Yacht Club, which still is going strong today. Maybe some of you belong. But there were people that had summer homes and they wanted private lessons for their children. So I got to think some ungodly hour before being on duty, and I had money all over the house, and my father would say, "Who left this $8 in the bathroom? I'm going to flush it down the toilet." That was his favorite expression. He found money. It's just as good
Because
as
we were supposed to hang on, you know.
put it in the bank, save it.
Oh, you would put it under your mattress was more his
Oh yeah.
way of saying it.
But that was other than that, it was boring. A boring job. It wasn't that.
Like, were the beaches real crowded?
I was at the New Bay Bathing Beach, and they didn't put in. No women went on the front beaches. But I had passed my life saving in college that year. I was a phys ed teacher, and I had been in New Hampshire taking this test, and I'll never forget the test. I'll only tell you this because it's probably the most frightful thing I've ever done. And in order to pass the test, they threw a white brick at the bottom of a freezing cold lake, and you had to get down there and get the brick and bring it up to the surface in order to pass the test. And I remember shivering on the outside, thinking, this might be my summer job or not. And then the teacher swam out, and you had to save the teacher, who immediately gave you a terrible time and tried to drown you. So it was, maybe some of you had taken that life-saving test, and it was a tough one, so I did spend the summer, but I made so much money just teaching private lessons. Yeah.
But I do
$800,
remember.
which is a lot.
Wait, how much?
800 just in lessons, that was a lot in those days.
I do remember, I can't think what it's called, when feminism, what is it? The lifeguards, which were mostly male, didn't want to have anything to do with the female lifeguard. You know, they
Yeah.
thought would have a dance every fall, at the end of every summer, remember? And they didn't want Chloe to be in on it because she was a female lifeguard and that she didn't,
I
she
wasn't on main
wasn't
beaches.
as good as the male lifeguards, they thought.
Discrimination early on.
But you said, yeah, that's the word I was looking for, discrimination. And the guys were banned except for one or two,
Yeah, that's true.
but,
How about the farmer's dinner?
well, we haven't
Yeah.
got the social life.
Social life, oh boy. Nil.
Well, we get to that. Social life, Mother always said, without the church and the fire company, there would be absolutely no social life in Beach Haven. And, but we also had school and Girl Scouts and I don't know what else. And I'm talking too much, but anyway, one thing great about Second Street and Barnegat in Beach Haven. I don't know what Second Street Barnegat, is there a Second Street Barnegat? Second Street in Beach Haven was great growing up because just between Bay Avenue and Beach Avenue, because from Beach to Atlantic was all summer people. But the year-round crowd was between Bay Avenue and Beach Avenue, just one block. And there were kids on both sides of that block. We had more kids on that street than any other street on the island. And there'd be softball games out there. It was just, and everybody was friendly. We were all about the same age. It was just a great place to grow up. Just wonderful because we had so much company. Church, fire company, school, Girl Scouts.
Well, the fire company had the yearly President's Day, maybe some of you go to it. They still have it, turkey dinner.
Turkey dinner.
And kids, high school girls, boys, parents, our parents worked at it. It was like a whole day endeavor. It was really a great spirit for the President's Weekend, which was in February. And everybody in town turned out to work at it, and lots of people came from that had been there for summer folks. So it was a great thing.
They had band then and dancing.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
there
right.
was always a band afterwards and dancing, and
They don't do that anymore.
no, but it was fun.
In school, we had a social life with school, and I was thinking one of the things you might be interested in was coming home on the bus from Barnegat, where we went, Barnegat Light kids went there from 6th to 12th grade. Beach Haven kids went there from 9th to 12th grade, through 12th grade. And coming home on the bus, it would be so hot on the mainland. You know, all the windows on the bus would be down and everything, and we'd start going across the bridges, and pretty soon we'd have to raise all the windows, it was so cold. And then during a storm, I remember we'd come home during a storm and that's when the bridges were flatter, I think, or something. Because we'd have the waves, spray from the waves hitting the buttons, hitting the windows on the bus. Okay. Then another topic I have is what it was like during World War II and the Hurricane of '44.
And the hurricane of '44, back then they couldn't predict a hurricane like they do today, and that was really bad. That's when we lost our boardwalk. We were eating dinner that night, and my mother looked out the backyard, and it was all orange water from the gravel. And we looked out the front door, and there's the boardwalk going down and it got so bad. That wind was so wicked. Didn't you two take a walk down to the beach?
No, I was with Ann Weiner. They let us out of school and sent us home, which was sort of stupid, but anyway, they did. My girlfriend, it was either freshman or sophomore year, I can't remember. We went down to the end of 2nd Street. The boardwalk was still there then. It was later that day. And the wind blew us all the way down, blew us a block down, and there's a pavilion there. And we were able to get a hold of the columns of the pavilion to get ourselves turned to go down Ingleside Avenue so we could get turned around, and then we got back home.
I remember looking out the attic window and you could see huge waves and they were 2 blocks, it was 2 blocks away.
I can
Right,
almost see it in
waves.
my head now.
It was just terrible. And my father got so worried, he thought we were all gonna wash away, so he started taking the doors off the house and tying them together with
Clothesline.
clothesline to make a raft. Well, thank God, the wind changed to the northwest and blew just as hard from the northwest as it had from the east, and everything beautiful, the most beautiful starry night that night you could ever imagine. Everybody was out in the streets looking at all the
Yeah, it was
damage.
just like silence, dead
Just,
silence.
yeah, you could see every star. It was amazing. So we survived that one. But Holgate really wiped. And I guess the Harvey Cedars too. It was really bad.
Well, during the World War II, we did a lot of hitchhiking, which we probably shouldn't have done a couple times, which I haven't. But anyway. And we had the blackouts, which I'm sure you know, we had the black shades to pull down. And once in a while, the siren would go off for practice, as I remember. And I remember a lot of planes and blimps around. And I was in 7th grade in the Beach Haven School, which was 2nd floor, and you could look out on the ocean. The ocean was a block and a half away. And I'd see the convoys go by, and a couple of times I saw depth charges go off because you'd see a spout of water come up in the air. And you could see that from the classroom. And oil on the beach. A lot of oil on the beach from the tankers or things that were torpedoed. And I'm talking too much.
No.
Mother kept a little jar of kerosene on the back steps with a rag there. So when we came back from the beach, we'd have to get all the tar off our body, and before we were allowed in the house. You want to say anything else about World War II? Or?
How about interesting people? Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I had something about interesting people, but one, I already told you about the 2 ladies that were illustrators for the Dick and Jane books. I thought they were interesting people. Another very interesting very interesting person, my girlfriend and I, this was before the hurricane, so it must have been like 42, 43. We were on our bicycles and headed for the inlet. And back in those days, Nelson Avenue is the last cross street, it's the last street in Beach Haven. And then if you go down there now, there's only the road straight to the end of the island, and there's some side streets to the west. Well, back when we were kids, there used to be a few side streets toward the ocean. They're not there anymore. And my friend and I think we were riding our bikes back from the inlet, and we saw this woman we thought was a witch out by her mailbox. And for some reason, we stopped and talked to her. And I don't know, she was dressed in, she looked witchy. And for some reason, we got talking to her, and I don't know whether it was that day or another day. She asked us to come visit her again. She lived about 3 houses toward the ocean. There was a street going east there back in those days. And we went to visit her in her house, and she got out all these newspaper clippings. I think her name was we called her Mrs. Marquis, I think it was. And she had been a newspaper woman. And she had all these things that she wanted to show us. I think she was a reporter for a Trenton paper, which I don't know enough about the papers in Trenton. But anyway, she and another group of people, they wanted to put out a big jetty, and she had all the pictures and everything, the artist renderings of what you're going to do. They're going to put out a big jetty, I think, either from Newfoundland or Nova Scotia, and change the course of the Gulf Stream. So she said it would be like Florida. If they could do that, it would be like Florida in New Jersey. She was a very interesting woman. Maybe it went out for Maine, but it seems to me it's more like Nova Scotia or Newfoundland. Well, anyway, the hurricane came, and those streets that went east of the boulevard were wiped out. Mrs. Marquis disappeared. The Coast Guard had been to try to get her to leave, and she says, I moved twice for the ocean. She had houses further out toward the ocean. She said, I moved twice for the ocean. I'm not going to move again. And they found her body on one of the sedges over in the bay, which was too big, but she was a very interesting person. Another interesting person, well, teenagers, you look at men, you know, well, I guess you look at men my age too, but anyway. You know, there was this, my girlfriend and I, there was this interesting looking man around town. We'd see him in the drugstore in Paxton's. It was before it was Kapler's, it was Paxton's. We'd see him in there, and he usually had a yellow slicker on or something. We'd see him walking up and down Beach Avenue and Atlantic Avenue. We kept wondering who it was, you know, and making up stories about him and thinking, oh, he's going to see so-and-so, and he must be having an affair with so-and-so. And this, well, you know who it turned out to be? Turned out to be Philip Drinker, who was the inventor of the iron lung. And he worked at the Harvard, you know, National Public Health School. And we found out later he was down there drying out.
Well, his sister became a famous author.
Oh yeah, Catherine Drinker Bowen, I'm sure you've all read some of her things. And she also did a wonderful book called Family Portrait. And in there is a whole chapter about Beach Haven, which is very interesting. It's a really good book.
And she has the best description of opening the
Opening
house
up your house,
for
yeah.
the
Yes.
springtime.
Yeah.
You can, the way she described it, you can just smell what it was like.
Yeah, that awful dang spell. And here's something else where is this? Oh, I don't know who this person is and nobody else does either, but I thought it was very interesting. For one summer, another girl and I were ushers at the local movie theater. If we had had a particularly busy night, the owner would give us some money for sodas at the drugstore across the street after we had seated people for the 10 o'clock show. Then this other girl and I would go for a short stroll on the boardwalk 2 blocks away. One night, as we were passing the last big house before the boardwalk, we could hear a woman weeping and sobbing. We stopped to listen and looked worried for a few moments, then continued on. I remember her name was Betty Parker. We were like, what is that? Can you hear that? You know, there's somebody sobbing and crying in there. And, but we didn't do anything about it. More than 50 years later, there was an article in the local paper about a ghost in that house. I had never thought to investigate it further at that time. I was 14 years old that August, so I never told anybody. So it was funny. I really probably did hear some weeping and sobbing. And it's
occupied at the time, or?
yeah, it was a rooming house, a guest house, and it's still there. The Perot by the Sea. It's on the corner of Center Street and Atlantic Avenue. It's the one with all the stained glass windows in it.
The windows are gone.
Hmm?
They took the windows out.
They did?
Yeah.
Oh. Oops, let's see, anything else?
We used to follow Steve Allen around town.
Oh, we
Remember
said Steve Allen.
Steve
was
Allen stayed on Third Street? 4th Street.
there. In Mrs. Sprague's house.
Yeah, 4th Street.
And I remember I felt so proud of myself. I crossed the street so he'd have to wait.
Hey, Chloe, tell them about Gerber's. I always loved Gerber's. I mean, I always consider
Oh,
that the
Gerber's.
department store.
Oh, yeah,
Beach Haven.
Gerber's? Oh, all the bathing suits they'd sell?
Oh, and Christmas shopping, you can always get.
Yeah, but did you probably never were from Happy that worked
A
there.
girlfriend of mine
Just told the
worked
story.
there every summer,
You Gerber's.
and a funny story she used to tell was, a lady came in to buy a girdle, and she got so nervous about it, to show her the girdles, that she said, "Mr. Girdle, this lady wants a Gerber." But another lady that was not very wealthy at all,
I love this story.
used to come in at Christmas time, and her gifts to people in her family was a spool of thread. And she would look over the different beautiful colors of the spools of thread. Oh, and pick out this one for her sister and this one for her grandmother. And that was her Christmas present. And they were, thrilled with these beautiful spools of thread.
But Gerber's was like they had furniture, they had clothing, they had shoes, they had fabric, they had thread, they had girdles. It was like a mini department store.
They had another
They had
store in
baby
Tuckerton too.
furniture.
Hmm?
They what?
They had another store in Tuckerton too, so if that store didn't have it, they could get it for you from the store in Tuckerton.
Gerber's is where Uncle Will's Pancake House
Oh,
is
okay.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Atlantic Books. It was, I used to love to, even as a kid, I used to love to go to Gerber's.
That's where I took you at Christmas.
Yeah, Dad used to take us.
That's down there for buying Christmas presents.
And New Previn, what was his name? The
New-
jewelry store.
Oh, the new Privet.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
Lexington, yeah.
he wasn't there very long though.
When we were kids, that's
That's
we
where
were.
my wedding ring came from. News. When
Was there any?
he
maybe
gave up,
people have
he
questions.
gave up driving the school bus.
Does anybody have anything to add that you,
Mom, I have to tell about the placenta house.
What?
Placenta house.
We've already mentioned that house. It was Julius Robinson's first place of business. We just went to, a bunch of us just went to Julius's 100th birthday yesterday. And it turns out that I was born in that house. And so many of us in this room probably were born at home. And the famous thing about the yard was my father took the placenta out in the yard and
I
buried it.
never knew that.
This was fascinating to my children. This is my son. It's-
Yeah, every time we walk by, the Tates would go, oh, that's the placenta house. And as a kid, what's a
Douglas, did you have anything to add?
Oh, no, it's just like, it's still
In that
fascinating.
same house that winter, well, what winter was that? What year were you born?
32.
32. And I had had my legs operated on that year, so I was in a cast for a long time from the hips to my toes. And I have a picture of Daddy holding me in his arms. You know, the thing they put between the cast, you know, holding that, and then here. And the old sneak box is behind us. Daddy and his brother-in-law bought an old sneak box they used to sail. Well, that sneak box got sawed up that winter for fuel for our stove to keep us warm. That was the end of the sneak box. That sneak box, it's funny, Mother tells a story with, it was our Uncle Jack Armstrong. And Daddy and Uncle Jack bought this sneak box. I don't know how big a one it was. And Mother said the old Scotsman they bought it from said, oh, it's as tight as a ball. As tight as a ball. Mother said it leaked like a sieve. But they went out in it. And that was an interesting thing about our parents, both mother and father. They really, you know, you always think of the natives, they never go in the water. You know, they're always working or something, you never see them down the beach line and stuff. Our mother and father went in every day. Mary said mother went in until she was 88 years old and had her stroke. She went in every day she could. And Daddy used to sail the boat. And when Chloe and I were, I don't know, at some point, one summer Chloe and I bought a Model A Ford and a sailboat together, 50-50, and Daddy taught us how to sail. Then would get mad at us when we didn't do it right.
And then he kept the oil going, recycling.
Oh, that Model A
Recycling in the
Ford.
Model A Ford by taking a metal hanger, and attaching it to a peanut can, which was held under as a oil drip towel. Which was important to
And we used to bring the Model A up to Barnegat Light, and I have pictures of us riding it on the dike. Yeah, we used to go up and down the dike in the Model A.
Well, I always liked Gammy's story of me too in the Model A. Gammy would sit on the front porch and she'd hear it coming down the street and she'd hear you guys. And then when you turn the corner, you'd all shut up. And as soon as you turn the corner,
Bill, the Methodist suit.
The Methodist, yeah.
Uriel was away at college, and my mother was a big pillar of the Methodist church down there, and Uriel decided to bring some friends home from
Oh,
college.
you're gonna tell
Maybe-
Who told you to tell that story?
Chrissy.
Well, it's sad because mother wasn't expecting them, but they had
No, she knew we were coming, but she hadn't
prepared.
She didn't have
Where'd
anything
she
for
get
us
the
to eat.
soup from? She got the soup from the church?
From the Methodist church,
Oh,
and
they had it
added
there.
to it, so she'd have something to give us. She thought, what am I gonna give those kids when they get down here from Vermont?
It was late at
And she
night.
thought, well, they just had this dinner, whatever, the church
The
dinner
church
at
dinner.
the church, maybe there was some soup left over, so she ran over and got some soup from the kitchen and came back, and we got in, I guess, sometime in the, after supper time, and you can continue from there.
Well, she watered it down, of course, to make it so
So we go,
everybody would have a bowl. And my father used to tease her about the watered down Methodist soup.
why are you giving those kids watered down Methodist soup?
And she burst out crying.
She was just trying
She
to
was
do the
trying
best she
so
could with what
hard.
she had.
Aunt Chloe, or tell about the Pop-Up always cooking everything in a
Oh, it's,
frying
she's got
pan.
that in the frying pan. Yeah, my mother went away for about 10 or 11 days when her father was dying in Boston. So we were stuck with Daddy's cooking. Well, he couldn't do anything without a large black iron frying pan. He even made his coffee in it in the morning. As long as he had his frying pan, he could go another day. And every day we had French fries. He knew how to make French fries by filling it with oil and we left our French fries. We were glad to see our mother.
Yeah, I have it here.
But
Chloe
Aunt
and Mary.
Chloe,
Chloe and Mary protested to Daddy, not French fries again.
then you had a summer job where the man made you
Oh,
sit down.
yes.
That's her bride.
Yeah, one of my first waitressing jobs was a very talented chef, and he worked himself to death because he ended up dying when he was 44 years old. But he was a wonderful chef, and I learned so much from him what he did in the kitchen. It was like a one-man restaurant. But he used to say at the end of the day, "Now, Chloe, I'm going to sit down and have my dinner, and I want you to come sit down and tell me about your father and his cooking." When our father came from, he was 17 years older than our mother, and he had had a whole different career. He had inherited a jewelry store. He was a watchmaker. His family had been in Burlington, New Jersey from when they came over on the Mayflower,
Their
wasn't it?
house is on the historic.
Yeah, their house is historic. I mean, he inherited this lovely jewelry store, but the problem is when you have a store, and some of you might know, you have to attend the store. You've got to be there.
Was not a businessman.
And it's not, it means you're inside. And when, I guess his father took him to Long Beach Island, he said he got a whiff of that, it was all there, and he said he didn't know what it was gonna take, but he was gonna live there. And he sold the jewelry store and just came down. He was a night watchman. And he knew enough Latin to write aqua pura
Yeah, but
on the water tank. And Mother, kind of snooty from Boston, she sees that and thinks, oh, somebody is pretty intelligent around here. Who could this be? Well, it ended up being the man she married, but he had had a whole different life at one time, and a different, he had been married before, and that was when divorce was like, ooh, let's hear about that. But like it was like secret, like we never asked Daddy what was your first wife
all
like.
their friends.
But then he married my mother, who was like 17 years younger, and started a whole new life. And he had a daughter with a first marriage, and she used to come and became good friends with all of us. In fact, she was close to my mother's age. It was really interesting, and Annalie was. But he really, nobody knew all he had lived before. It was
We used to ask him, I remember asking him why we lived here, and he said, the air's so good and the water's so pure, why would you want to live anyplace else?
He
But
just
then-
loved it.
Yeah, you went to some 50th reunion, and some guy said to you at the reunion, I remember coming to your house and
Oh
watching
yeah, I was
your.
gonna read that about Dad ate his coffee. In
Yeah.
1998, I went to a college reunion. I met someone there whom I hadn't seen since 1951. In the summer of 1950, he had spent 2 nights at my home, staying with my family. At the reunion, he said, I'll always remember your father making coffee in the frying pan. Oh, she likes that one, yeah, the babysitting. Oh, that is funny.
My father used to kid little children. I mean, he just had the best time with little kids, kidding them and so forth. And he we'd be sitting on our front porch in the summertime, and a kid would come down the street. He says, "Hi, Sonny, how you doing?" "Oh, good." And he said, "How's your aunt?" And the kid said, "Which one?" And my father said, "The fat one." "Oh, she's fine." He said, "Every kid has a fat aunt." And he also sat on the porch there with his oil can. And the kid came down riding his bike or a tricycle or roller skates, and they squeak a little bit, and he'd run right out there and oil.
He couldn't stand noise. I think he would have let us do anything on earth that you can imagine if we didn't make any noise doing it. And he even gave away, Mother always liked to have a piano in the house. He even gave away one of her pianos once because some girl we saw yesterday, not a girl anymore, but Esther came by with some friends with a truck, and they carted off the piano. And I was sitting there laying on the back of the truck, put it down to the brick road where Esther lived. And Mother couldn't understand why Daddy gave her piano away, but then she got a new one.
And I just want to read one more story of my father, then we'll change the subject too. My father was quite a character. I mean, he would kid kids and everybody, any age.
Oh, that one about Miss Green, the tennis racket.
This kid, Muriel was taking care of a kid named Curtis, who was 7. He was a handful with an imagination almost equal to my father's. Daddy's experience with Curtis, to my knowledge, is the only time one of his almost believable stories backfired. I had brought Curtis around to the house one afternoon because I didn't know what else to do with him. All other attempts to amuse or keep him busy had failed. Daddy was sitting on the front porch with my cousin. They welcomed us and realized I had come home at the last resort because Daddy immediately started talking about the time he was captured by Indians out west. And about the big game hunts in Africa. He also mentioned that he had captured some of the animals and now had a lion and tiger caged in the backyard. Curtis was a picture of undivided attention. Daddy continued with his tale a while longer with an assist from my cousin. Then he asked Curtis, "Have you ever done any hunting?" And Curtis said, "Oh, yes." Daddy said, "Would you like to go hunting with me sometime?" "Oh, yes. And can I see that lion and tiger you had?" Daddy answered, "They're sleeping now and can't be disturbed." Curtis, "But if you're going to go hunting with me, I have to make sure you know how to crawl through the bushes." "You have to learn to crawl on your stomach." "Oh, I can do that," said Curtis, getting down on his hands and knees and crawling across the porch. No, you're too high," exclaimed Daddy. "You have to be lower or the animals will see you." "Now lie flat on your stomach and move along, pulling yourself with your hands." Curtis tried this and got more criticism from my cousin and father. "Hey, your rear end's too high. Your feet are making too much noise. You're breathing too loudly." After about 10 minutes of crawling practice, Daddy said, "Do you know anything about the wind?" Curtis gave him a proud, "Yes, it blows." "Well, to be a good hunter, you have to know which way the wind is blowing. Otherwise, the animals will smell you," Daddy said. He then demonstrated the method of wetting your finger, holding it up, and telling the direction of the wind. Curtis tried it again and again. If he said north, Daddy would say, "No, it is north-northwest." If he said south, they would say east-southeast. Curtis didn't get discouraged. Although the men were rather ruthless on a 7-year-old, Curtis seemed to be eating it up. Then there followed conversation on guns, proper hunting equipment, the best things to take to eat, etc. They all concurred with Curtis that peanut butter and jelly sandwiches were the best. It was now time for me to take Curtis home, and he departed reluctantly. Mother and father were sitting down to breakfast at 7 o'clock the next morning when there was a knock on the door. Mother answered and called Daddy. "There's a little boy here to see you." "Hi, Mr. Oliver, I'm all ready to go hunting," beamed Curtis with a toy gun in one hand and a bag of lunch in the other.
Do we want to take questions now, or?
Sure.
Yeah,
What school did you go to in Vermont?
Goddard College.
How many storms? So you mentioned the storm of 44. What other storms? Remember?
You know, I lost track of all the names of them.
That was the bad one.
That's bad.
44 was terrible.
Yeah.
I remember we had two girls, Coast Guard, oh, we didn't tell you, Mother used to rent rooms too. And in the summer, we would, we'd have a double bed, a cot, and a bunk bed in the dining room. 5 of us would be in the dining room, and other summers we'd be up in the attic, the 5 of us. And we'd rent out the 3 rooms on the second floor with 1 bathroom. All those years, people always had, you know, nobody has 2 or 3 or 4 beds like they do now.
And Daddy always invited him for dinner, which horrified Mother, which, like, we weren't really prepared. But we invite people.
FHB?
HV.
Yes, yeah, kind of like you people do now.
So much plenty more.
You forgot the story about the dog and the Ferris wheel.
Oh, that's a cute story. Let's see if I can find that.
Oh dear, this is getting more talk about our father, but he was so
Yeah.
much a part of Beach Haven in those days.
Something.
Pip, what was the dog's name?
Pup. We were very original in our name.
Oh.
Can I do the nasty one about Miss Green or no?
No, just do the June Pup.
Yeah.
When I can find it. Well, we had Pup and it was a stray, I guess, and for some reason he ate good things. Chewed up my orthopedic shoes. I had orthopedic shoes that were very expensive until I was about 12 years old. He chewed up a nice big pocketbook that an aunt had given us. The aunt had had some money. And we just everything. Finally, I guess they decided they had to get rid of Pup. So they said they were sending him over to the mainland. They had what'd they have over there? A dog farm? A dog, Daddy would say. It's just wonderful. They have all kinds, they have merry-go-rounds, they have Ferris wheels. They have all kinds of things for the dogs. And look at how it is.
Oh, he'd even say that he passed by and there was
Oh, yeah,
Pup
that was.
waving from the top of the stairs.
I came home from Philadelphia the other day and I saw Pup right at the top of the Ferris wheel and he waved to me. And the last line of what I wrote, and we believed him.
No, he said he was having a wonderful time.
Oh, yeah. He was having a wonderful time.
I have a serious question.
Sure.
What did you do for hospitals? Where did you go?
I go to the hospital.
Oh, Kimball.
Oh,
And
Campbell.
Lakewood.
It's still there today.
Dr.
When I was born, there was no doctor. They had to get the doctor from
Tucker.
Manahawkin. I forget what his name was. It's on the birth certificate, I think.
Dr. Hilliard.
Hilliard, I guess it was, yeah. And then when Chloe was born, was Dr.
Dr.
Dodd?
Dodd.
Dr. Dodd hadn't moved to the island when I was born, but he did, because he ended up living across the street from us for a while.
But
And
he
we were
had,
very fortunate to have Dr. Dodd.
he had
Everybody else
facility,
on
he
the
had
island
like rooms or like facilities, like a little mini
In the
hospital.
cellar, yeah.
Yeah, you could,
Well,
you
he's-
could get your tonsils out and stay overnight, that kind of
Well,
thing.
He
he's
was-
the one who donated the decoys to us, right?
No, that was Todd.
But that was Todd.
was.
That's-
The
And
That was
then
Dennis.
it was Todd and the doctor was Dodd.
Yeah.
It's almost like Walnut and Walnut. The same street here in South.
We never had a doctor on the island, I don't think, until Dr. Dodd moved in. He must have come in like 1930, maybe 31.
But he was extremely talented. I
Yeah, he
mean,
was a
years
surgeon.
later, we realized he was such
We were very lucky.
a very successful surgeon working out of Paul Kimball and very well thought of all over Ocean County. You know, we were very fortunate to
And for
have
a
him.
dentist, we had somebody that used to come, well, you don't know Firm Kramer, you know, or some of you might know Firm Kramer's. Oh, I don't even know what it's called. The lumberyard.
Okay.
He had
Yeah.
some,
Where the Marlin is now.
no, further down,
It's
where the ice plant used to be. Anyway, there's a man came from Tuckerton, Tuckerton. And it done it maybe once or twice a week from Tuckerton, and he was the only dentist we knew of until and his fillings would always come out. He'd stand in water and give you a shock when he was drilling your tooth or something. And we just didn't have good dental health. And then Dr. Todd was the dentist, but then he went away, as we were saying earlier, he went away during World War II in the service, so then we had to go to Philadelphia for the dentist.
So he's.
And we went to a one-eyed dentist up there. My girlfriend would take the bus up and she always had real, she always just said gussy up too much, real lot of lipstick, and she'd come out in his office looking like she'd been through a hurricane. And I always thought maybe that had something to do because he only had one eye.
Yeah, we were pretty isolated as
Yeah, it
far
was
as
hard.
services.
It was hard to get off the island.
We have a question.
No, I have a question. In the summer, how often did you go to Manahawkin? Because it's a big deal for us to go to Manahawkin in the summer, but I would imagine being a teenager and shaving back then. You wouldn't
We
go
didn't
very
There's
often.
nothing
We never
there.
went to
There was
that.
nothing in
There was only a
Manhattan.
gas station.
We were,
Skating rink.
we were not allowed to go to the skating rink they used to have there unless it was a school affair.
Yes,
that was- we might
bed, kids went.
We might get, we're in the bathroom. I think I never went to Manahawkin, I've had a date once. So I could have been in college for all I know. And we went over and played, and bowled.
Oh, yeah, Jimmy Mascolas.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the only time I went to Manahawkin.
It was funny, we girls all wanted to be on the go, and our mother was very young acting, and she always wanted to be on the go too. And my father used to say, I don't know why you women all want to go somewhere. He said, we're going to go downtown right now and see all the people on the bus that are coming in to town. There's no need to go out. Everybody wants to come in.
I remember begging my girlfriend and I begging, oh, can we please go to camp up in the Poconos? Oh, please let us go to camp. Why do you want to go up there? Everybody's coming in. Well, he finally let us go, and it was just, we learned. We got up there, 100 degrees, weeding the tennis court. 100-degree temperatures, and here we could have been down on the ocean and
Yeah.
swimming and everything.
Tell them about
He was
Chloe.
right.
Chloe was gonna go, oh, you did go
I
to
did go to
camp.
camp. I went with Roger Parker and Chris Anderson.
And Daddy said, what do you wanna go there for? Go ahead.
And at Camp Anaba it was outside in Pewtown. And he thought that was really funny. He said, well, it must be close to Chambersburg
At Pottstown.
and Pottstown.
Chloe had to go through it.
It was Pewtown. It was Pewtown, which was close to Pottstown.
And
Oh, and Chambersburg.
But four of us went, and I'll never forget how happy we were coming home on the bus. In the back seat, bouncing up and down, we're going over, it's cool. We had never been any place that was as hot as inland in the summer. But it was, we got the urge to get off of this island, I know that.
Yeah.
Did any of you three ladies move away from the island at any time other than college?
Oh, yes, oh, yes.
I moved away for about 25 years.
Oh, okay.
And I lived all over the place.
Okay.
California, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Germany, Switzerland.
But they all came.
And boy, our mother was right there visiting.
Yeah, I can see my mother came over to visit me in Germany and she was out there skiing on the Zugspitze.
Yes, she was.
Well, this is beside the point of the topic tonight, but it was interesting. We got up there, she and my husband and I, and you have to take a tram to get up there. And we all went skiing. She took a lesson. And my husband went down, you go way up, and you're at the top practically, and then you slide down. And he didn't show up when it was time to get the last cog railway down. And so I went up to somebody on the German ski team, and I said, wo ist mein Mann? And
Where's my band?
And then he got the United States ski team, which some of them, they were there also. Well, you should see them take off from the Schneeferner house. Shoo! And they found him. He was down there, down the slope quite a ways, and had put his broken ski up in the sets.
Wow.
So they found him and they got back. By then it was too late for us to get down the mountain. So, and there was no room at the inn. So what are they gonna do with my mother and my husband and me? And finally, they put us in, we bunked in with the American Ski Patrol.
Did you really?
Yeah, in bunk beds, the three of us.
What year was that?
And then we got down the mountain the next day, when the early, when the crowd came up, we took it down and got him to the doctor, and he did have a broken leg.
I've lived a lot of places. I could hardly wait to get away from this winter wind.
Right.
It was just, when I went away to college, I said, that's it. I gotta get away from, I would never come back here to live year round. But I lived in Georgia, Michigan, Washington DC, and I've lived in Medford Lakes 45 years.
You did?
Yes, I've been there because I love it.
I'm from Medford.
Are you?
Yeah, we lived in Medford 36 years.
Oh, well,
I'm sure
and
you
my
know
son
that.
there, he was raised in Medford Lakes. Now he loves it, and he's down in Beach Haven.
I'm back here.
Mother, where'd you go?
Already got late, right? John Maryland.
When we got married, John was going to the University of Virginia down in Charlottesville, that was lovely down there. And when he got out of there, we lived up near Trenton at the Roebling Wire. He worked for Roebling Wire mill. And then his father decided to sell his headboat business, so we moved down here. And moved out of a brand new house that we had built ourselves to this old Victorian house that needed so much work. And I didn't want to buy it, but it's the best house on the island. And the best street on the island.
I told my father he ripped me off and I didn't talk to him for a month.
How much you bought it for?
$14,000 on 3 lots. That was in '62, so 40.
He had it for sale for 2 years and nobody came to see it except Teddy Barber.
We knew the people who owned it before you did.
Oh, did you tell him about?
No, well,
Yeah. The people from Hollybush came down to see us last week.
Oh, good heavens.
yeah. Well, our house was built in 1886 by the Whitney family, who owned a glass factory in Glassboro, New Jersey. And their winter home was Hollybush, Rowan University. And that's where President Johnson and Premier Kosygin met in 1967 at some big summit. And so it's interesting. I want to go up and see it. They've renovated it and got it all spruced up.
And of course, well, the Nixons, well, Mrs. Nixon was a Whitney.
Yeah, she was their daughter.
And,
Yeah, she was their daughter.
Mrs.
Not
Mrs. Nixon
No.
had
No
been
relation.
a classmate of my mother's in grammar school or something like
Oh,
that.
really?
So they're very good.
Yeah, so our house has only been owned by 2 families, the Whitney family and then the
Right.
Larson family. But it's a wonderful old house.
It fell into good hands.
Any other
I think
questions?
that's about it. Well, you had enough of the Oliver girls.